The incense route, a lifeline of trade. The Nabataean camel caravans traveled along one of the most lucrative trade routes of the ancient world, the incense route. Stretching over 2,000 kilometers, it connected the incense-producing lands of southern Arabia with the markets of the Mediterranean. Frankincense from Yemen could take 65 days to reach Petra. Myrrh from Somalia and incense from Oman traveled along the same paths. Gold, spices, textiles, and exotic animals also passed through Petra's gates. Every step of the journey was dangerous, blistering heat, bandits, and waterless stretches. But the Nabataeans knew every oasis, every safe pass, every hidden water source. Petra, the heart of the caravan network. Petra was not just a waypoint. It was the central hub of the trade network. Caravans from Arabia, Egypt, and Mesopotamia all converged here. Once goods reached Petra, they were taxed by the Nabataean authorities. Some were stored in vast warehouses. Others were prepared for onward journeys to ports like Gaza, where ships carried them to Rome, Greece, and beyond. These taxes and trade fees made Petra immensely wealthy. The profits built its grand monuments, funded its complex water systems, and supported its cosmopolitan lifestyle. Caravan life. A Nabataean caravan could include hundreds of camels, each led by a handler. The journey was slow, often no more than 30 kilometers per day, but steady. The caravan masters were experts in logistics, timing their movements to avoid the worst of the heat and stopping at strategic locations where the Nabataeans had built cisterns and storage depots. At night, the desert was alive with the sound of bells around the camels' necks, the crackle of campfires, and the smell of food cooking. Traders shared news, negotiated deals, and planned the next leg of their journey. Goods that made Petra rich. The list of items passing through Petra reads like a treasure inventory. Incense and myrrh, used in temples, medicine, and perfumes. Gold and silver, from Africa and Arabia. Copper, mined in nearby regions. Bitumen, a black tar-like substance from the Dead Sea, used for waterproofing ships. Spices, cinnamon, pepper, and saffron from India. Textiles and silk. Luxury fabrics from the East. The Nabataeans also traded in information. News from distant lands was as valuable as gold to kings and generals. Security and strategy. The deserts around Petra were dangerous, but the Nabataeans had an advantage. They controlled key choke points and passes. Bandits rarely attacked Nabataean caravans, knowing that retaliation would be swift and brutal. In times of war, the Nabataeans could use their knowledge of the terrain to vanish into the desert, making them almost impossible to catch. This same skill allowed them to resist powerful invaders like Antigonus One-Eyed in the 4th century BC. The camel as a cultural icon. Camels were so central to Nabataean life that they became a symbol of their identity. Coins and carvings from Petra depict camels alongside kings and gods. Camel imagery appears in tombs and temples, symbolizing endurance and prosperity. To the Nabataeans, the camel was not just an animal. It was a partner in survival, a guardian of wealth, and a bridge between worlds. The decline of the camel. Caravans. Petra's prosperity was tied to its role in caravan trade, but when the Romans developed new maritime routes that bypassed the overland trails, the flow of goods and the wealth it brought began to dwindle. Yet during its height, the camel had carried Petra to glory, making it the beating heart of one of the most profitable trade networks in antiquity. Water, Petra's lifeline and power. In the desert, water is more valuable than gold. For the Nabataeans, controlling water wasn't just about survival, it was about power. And in Petra, they turned water into an instrument of prestige, engineering one of the most advanced hydraulic systems of the ancient world. The desert paradox. At first glance, Petra seems like the last place you'd find abundant water. Surrounded by arid mountains and scorched valleys, it appears inhospitable. Yet the city's location was chosen with precision, nestled in a basin where seasonal rains and natural springs could be harnessed. The Greek geographer Strabo noted that Petra abounded with water, a statement that would seem impossible without understanding Nabataean ingenuity. The Sick, more than a gateway. The Sick, the winding canyon that leads to Petra's treasury, was not just a dramatic entrance, it was part of the water system. Along its walls ran deep rock-cut channels, carrying fresh water from springs high in the surrounding mountains. As travelers approached Petra, they would hear the soft murmur of water running beside them, a subtle reminder that they were entering a city of wealth and control, an engineering marvel. The Nabataeans built an interconnected network of rock-cut channels that followed natural contours, terracotta pipes to carry water over long distances, underground cisterns lined with waterproof plaster, settling tanks to filter out debris before storage. This system could supply up to 8 liters of water per person per day, enough not only for drinking but for agriculture, bathing, and decorative fountains. Gardens in the desert. Petra was not a dry, dusty settlement. It was a city of green courtyards, orchards, and even pools. Archaeologists have found evidence of fruit trees, possibly pomegranates, figs, and grapes, flower gardens in public and private spaces, reflecting pools that showcased Petra's wealth to visitors. To someone arriving after weeks in the desert, the sight of running water and lush plants was both a relief and a powerful statement. We have mastered the desert. Water as power. In ancient Petra, controlling water meant controlling life itself. The Nabataeans' ability to store and distribute water gave them a strategic advantage. It sustained the population during droughts. It attracted traders who knew they could find reliable supplies. It allowed the city to host large festivals and political gatherings without fear of shortages. Visitors walking into Petra were not just impressed by its monuments, they were awed by its vitality in a place where nature dictated scarcity. The great pools and cisterns. One of the most impressive features was a massive open-air pool, nearly 50 meters across, located in the city center. Fed by the water channels, it acted as both a reservoir and a decorative feature. Nearby, large cisterns stored excess water for dry months. On the opposite side of the city, archaeologists have found evidence of an artificial river running parallel to the main street, complete with stone-lined banks, not for necessity, but for beauty. Adaptation, not domination. Unlike the Romans, who often reshaped landscapes to suit their needs, the Nabataeans adapted their water system to the natural contours of the land. They used gravity, natural slopes, and existing channels to move water efficiently. This harmony with the environment allowed their system to function for centuries with minimal maintenance. The visitor's experience. Imagine arriving at Petra after 2 months in the desert. You pass through the Sak, hear the trickle of water, emerge into a city alive with fountains and greenery. You drink cool, clean water from a stone basin, wash away the desert dust, and look around at orchards and gardens. It wasn't just a convenience, it was a show of dominance, a reminder that here, the Nabataeans ruled both the land and its most precious resource. A lasting legacy. Even after Petra's decline, parts of the water system remained in use for centuries. Today, traces of these channels and cisterns still cling to the canyon walls, silent witnesses to the engineering genius that allowed a desert city to flourish. Water was Petra's lifeline, but it was also a symbol, proof that the Nabataeans could bend nature to their will without breaking it. In the desert, that kind of mastery was the ultimate power. Wars and defenses. Petra's wealth was a beacon, and like all beacons, it attracted attention. The Nabataeans, masters of trade and engineering, also had to be masters of survival. In a land where empires rose and fell through conquest, Petra stood its ground for centuries, defending its riches from some of the most formidable powers of the ancient world. The desert fortress, without walls. Unlike many ancient cities, Petra had no great defensive walls encircling it. Instead, its best protection was geography. The city was surrounded by sheer cliffs, narrow canyons, and barren desert. The only major approach was through the Syke, a winding passage barely wide enough for two camels to walk side by side. Any invading force would have to funnel through this natural choke point, an ideal place for defenders to ambush them from above. The first great threat, Antigonus One-Eyed. One of the earliest and most dramatic tests of Nabataean resilience came in 312 BC. At the time, the Near East was in turmoil following the death of Alexander the Great. His generals, the Diadochi, carved up his empire and fought bitterly for supremacy. Among them was Antigonus the First Monophthalmus, known as Antigonus One-Eyed, a warlord who had his sights set on the Nabataeans' wealth. Learning of their control over lucrative Arabian trade routes, Antigonus sent an army to seize Petra. The Nabataeans, warned in advance, evacuated their families and treasures to a safe location and lured the enemy deep into the desert. Deprived of water and harassed by swift Nabataean attacks, Antigonus's army was forced to retreat. When he tried again, the result was the same. The desert itself became the Nabataeans' ally. A reputation for invincibility. These early victories gave the Nabataeans a reputation as desert warriors who could outmaneuver and outlast larger armies. They fought not through brute force, but through strategy, controlling oases and water supplies, using camels to move quickly across difficult terrain, avoiding pitched battles, and instead striking at supply lines. It was a style of warfare that baffled outsiders and made Petra a fortress without needing massive walls, neighbors, and rivals. In the centuries that followed, the Nabataeans found themselves surrounded by powerful neighbors. The Seleucid Empire to the north, based in Syria, the Ptolemaic Kingdom to the west, ruling Egypt, and eventually, the ever-expanding Roman Empire. The Nabataeans navigated this geopolitical minefield with a mix of diplomacy and deterrence. They formed alliances when it suited them, paid tribute when necessary, and used their wealth to buy peace. But they were never afraid to show their teeth when threatened. The role of trade in defense. Petra's economic importance acted as both a shield and a sword. Empires benefited from Nabataean trade, and attacking Petra risked disrupting a profitable network. The Nabataeans also knew how to play rivals against one another, ensuring that no single power could dominate their lands without provoking the others. Petra's military forces. Though not a militaristic society in the same sense as Sparta or Rome, the Nabataeans maintained a capable fighting force. Their soldiers were skilled in archery, ideal for desert skirmishes, camel-mounted combat, allowing rapid movement and surprise attacks, close-quarters fighting in the narrow canyons around Petra. They also employed scouts who could track enemy movements across miles of sand, ensuring they were rarely taken by surprise. The psychological edge part of Petra's defense was psychological. Stories of Antigonus's failed invasions spread, and the image of the Nabataeans as elusive desert warriors grew. This reputation alone may have deterred some would-be invaders, who knew that even a victorious battle could turn into disaster if their army became stranded in the waterless wastes. Defending the treasure. The Nabataeans were careful with their wealth. Instead of keeping all their riches in one location, they stored valuables in hidden places, carved into inaccessible cliffs or concealed deep in the desert. Even if an enemy reached Petra, they might find the city's most prized treasures had already vanished into the sands. The Roman shadow. By the 1st century BC, the greatest looming threat was Rome. Unlike previous enemies, the Romans were methodical, patient, and skilled in desert campaigning. For decades, Petra avoided direct confrontation, maintaining friendly trade relations while watching Rome's conquests inch closer. But the Nabataeans knew that one day, the desert might not be enough to shield them from the ambitions of the world's most powerful empire. For now, though, Petra stood strong, a city whose defenses were carved not from stone, but from the shifting sands and winding canyons of the land itself. Greek, Roman, and Nabataean cultural fusion, Petra was more than a desert stronghold or a bustling marketplace. It was a cultural crossroads. Here, the traditions of Arabia met the artistry of Greece and the engineering of Rome. Over centuries, these influences blended into something uniquely Nabataean, giving Petra its distinctive character. A city open to the world. The Nabataeans were traders by profession and diplomats by necessity. Every caravan brought not just goods, but ideas, stories, customs, and artistic styles from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Greek stonemasons, Roman engineers, Egyptian merchants, and Judean craftsmen all walked Petra's streets. In this cosmopolitan atmosphere, cultures didn't just coexist, they intertwined. The theater, a Greek stage in the desert. One of Petra's most striking examples of foreign influence is its theater. Carved directly into the rose-red rock, the theater's design is distinctly Greek, a semicircular orchestra at the base, tiered seating rising above it, and an upper level reserved for the common citizens. When first built, the theater could seat around 3,000 people, but it was later expanded to hold 8,000 spectators. Here, audiences might have watched Greek comedies, Roman tragedies, musical performances, and perhaps even Nabataean storytelling adapted for the stage. The theater's position, cut into the cliffs beside older rock-cut tombs, also shows how the Nabataeans repurposed and transformed earlier structures into new public spaces. Private homes with Roman comforts. In Petra's wealthy districts, archaeologists have uncovered Nabataean villas that rival Roman townhouses. These residences often featured multiple rooms around a central courtyard, painted plaster walls with colorful designs, imported marble and fine pottery, Roman-style bathhouses with hypocaust heating, a system of hot air circulating under the floor. It's striking to imagine such luxuries in the middle of the desert. But for Petra's elite, the comforts of Rome were as important as the traditions of their own people. The colonnaded streets, Hellenistic order. Petra's main avenues were lined with colonnades, rows of columns supporting covered walkways inspired by Greek and Hellenistic city planning. These shaded pathways connected public buildings, markets, and plazas, creating an organized urban layout that balanced beauty with practicality. Temples for many gods. Religious architecture in Petra reflected its multicultural nature. Nabataean gods like Dushara and Al-Uzza had temples adorned with local symbols, but the structures themselves often borrowed from Greek and Roman forms. Tall columns, symmetrical facades, and decorative friezes. Some temples even honored foreign deities directly, further showing Petra's openness to outside influences. The triclinium, a Roman dining tradition. In some of Petra's tombs, such as the obelisk tomb, archaeologists have found triclinia, rooms with stone benches arranged on three sides, sloping inward for reclining diners. This was a distinctly Roman and Hellenistic style of feasting, but in Petra, it took on a new meaning. Instead of being purely for entertainment, these triclinia were often located beneath tombs and used for funerary banquets, blending Roman dining customs with Nabataean ancestor worship. Art that spoke. Many languages. Petra's art was a visual conversation between cultures. Greek-style sculptures stood beside abstract beetles, sacred stones representing Nabataean gods. Roman motifs like winged lions and floral garlands appeared on Nabataean tomb facades. Inscriptions were written in Nabataean script, but sometimes accompanied by Greek or Latin translations. This blending didn't dilute Nabataean identity, it enriched it, allowing Petra to project itself as both proudly local and cosmopolitan. The Nabataean twist. While they borrowed from their neighbors, the Nabataeans never copied blindly. They adapted. Greek columns in Petra might be topped with floral capitals unique to Nabataean style. Roman arches could frame facades with distinctly Arabian proportions. This fusion created a visual identity that was unmistakably Petra-esque, familiar enough to impress foreign visitors, but distinct enough to remind them whose city they were in. A cultural statement. Petra's architecture and art were more than decoration. They were political statements. By blending Greek elegance, Roman grandeur, and Nabataean ingenuity, the city told every visitor, "We are part of your world, and we are your equals." In the shimmering sunlight, as traders and travelers walked past colonnades and carved facades, Petra must have felt like the center of a world without borders, a place where cultures met, mingled, and created something new. City of the Dead. Tombs and burial customs. Petra is often called the Rose City, but it could just as easily be called the City of the Dead. Scattered across its valleys and carved high into its cliffs are more than 600 tombs, monumental resting places for kings, nobles, and wealthy citizens, as well as simpler graves for the common people. These tombs were not just burial chambers, they were declarations of status, faith, and identity. A landscape of monuments. As you move through Petra, the sheer number of tombs is overwhelming. Some are colossal facades dominating entire cliff faces. Others are modest niches barely large enough for a single body. Together, they turn the surrounding sandstone into a sprawling necropolis. For the Nabataeans, death was not hidden away. It was integrated into the very heart of the city, a constant reminder of ancestry, tradition, and the afterlife. The Treasury, a royal tomb. The most famous of all Petra's tombs, the Treasury, Al-Khazne, is believed to have been built as the mausoleum of King Aretas IV. Its grand Corinthian columns, Greek-style tholos, and elaborate sculptures send a clear message. This was the resting place of a ruler who wanted his memory to echo through the ages. The monastery, monument of the mountains. Even larger than the Treasury is Ad-Dair, or the monastery, carved high in the mountains. Measuring 50 meters wide and 45 meters tall, it likely served both as a tomb and a ceremonial space. Its size and remote location suggest it was intended for monumental gatherings honoring the dead. Tomb of Unanswered. Power in stone. Among the elite tombs is the tomb of Unanswered, built for a man who served as something like Petra's prime minister. The facade combines Nabataean, Greek, and Roman elements, topped with stair-like crenellations symbolizing the journey to heaven. Inside are 11 burial niches for Unanswered's family, a statement that status extended beyond the grave. The obelisk tomb and the Roman dining room. The obelisk tomb is one of Petra's most unusual structures. Above the burial chamber rise 4 pointed obelisks, possibly representing the family buried there. But directly beneath the tomb is a triclinium, a banquet hall with 3 stone benches sloping inward. In Roman tradition, triclinia were for reclining banquets. In Petra, they served a funerary purpose. Here, relatives would gather to feast, drink wine, and burn incense in honor of the dead. It was both a celebration and a farewell, blending Roman social customs with Nabataean religious rites. Burial customs. Ancient accounts and archaeological evidence reveal much about Nabataean burial practices. The body was washed and perfumed with incense, such as frankincense or myrrh. It was wrapped in fine cloth and placed in a rock-cut niche. The grave was sealed with a stone slab, often held in place with mud mortar. Some tombs contained goods for the afterlife, pottery, jewelry, or tools, reflecting beliefs that life continued beyond death. Unlike the Egyptians, the Nabataeans did not mummify their dead, but they shared the belief that the soul's journey continued after burial. Symbols of the afterlife. Tombs often featured symbolic carvings, steps on the roof representing the soul's ascent to the heavens, rosettes and floral motifs symbolizing eternal life, betyls, rectangular sacred stones, representing deities who would protect the dead. These symbols blurred the line between architecture and religion, making each tomb both a monument and a temple. The democratic necropolis. While Petra's most famous tombs belong to kings and nobles, many smaller, simpler graves dot the cliffs. These were for merchants, artisans, and ordinary citizens. Even in death, status mattered. But the sheer number of tombs shows that remembrance was a value shared across Petra's society. Death at the heart of the city. Unlike modern cities where cemeteries are separate, Petra's tombs were interwoven with daily life. You could walk from a bustling market into a valley lined with grand mausoleums. For the Nabataeans, the presence of the dead among the living was not morbid. It was a constant reminder of heritage, continuity, and the gods who watched over both worlds. A city that spoke through its tombs. Petra's tombs are silent now, their contents long plundered, but their facades still speak. They tell of a people who blended artistry with devotion, wealth with humility, and foreign influence with local tradition. They tell us that in Petra, the boundary between life and death was not a wall, but a doorway carved into stone. Gods and beliefs. The spiritual side of Petra was not only a city of trade and monuments, it was also a city of faith. Religion shaped the Nabataean way of life, influencing their art, architecture, and even their relationship with the surrounding landscape. From grand temples in the city center to sacred altars high in the mountains, the Nabataeans wove spirituality into every corner of their world. A pantheon of gods. The Nabataeans worshipped a mix of local deities and foreign gods, reflecting Petra's position as a crossroads of cultures. The most important were Dushara, Lord of the Mountain, the supreme male deity and protector of the kingdom. Al-Uzza, a goddess associated with power, fertility, and the stars, often considered Dushara's consort. Manat, a goddess linked to fate and destiny. But Petra's temples also honored Greek and Roman gods, often equating them with Nabataean ones. For example, Dushara was sometimes represented like Zeus, while Al-Uzza could be identified with Aphrodite or Venus. Temples in the city. In the heart of Petra stood monumental temples, some dedicated to specific deities, others serving as multi-purpose sanctuaries. The architecture blended Nabataean design with Greek and Roman features, tall columns, wide courtyards, and elaborate friezes. Worshippers might have entered carrying offerings of incense, wine, or precious goods, seeking blessings for their families, businesses, or journeys. Betyls. The stone faces of the gods. One of the most unique features of Nabataean religion was the use of betyls, rectangular stone blocks representing deities. Some were plain, others were carved with simple facial features, star-like eyes, a straight nose, sometimes a faint mouth. These beetles could be found in temples, in niches along Petra's streets, and even in tombs. They served as both sacred symbols and portable representations of the gods, allowing worship in multiple settings. Religion. Written in stone, over 300 inscriptions in the Nabataean script have been found in Petra, many of them dedicatory texts carved into or near religious monuments. These often mention the names of gods, the names of those making offerings, and the purpose of the dedication, from personal health to the prosperity of the city. The script itself is significant. Scholars believe the Arabic alphabet may have evolved from Nabataean writing, high places of worship. For the Nabataeans, the mountains around Petra were more than a backdrop. They were sacred spaces. Two of the most important deities, Dushara and Al-Uzza, were connected to high places. Priests and pilgrims would climb steep paths to reach mountaintop altars far above the city. Here, close to the heavens, sacrifices and rituals were performed. The high place of sacrifice, one of Petra's most famous religious sites, consists of a large rectangular altar for burning incense and making offerings, a smaller circular basin for pouring libations, liquid offerings, two stone obelisks, possibly representing Dushara and Al-Uzza, standing as eternal witnesses to the ceremonies. Sacrifice and ritual. Ancient sources suggest that the Nabataeans performed animal sacrifices, but there is no evidence for human sacrifice. Sheep, goats, and possibly camels may have been offered to the gods, their smoke drifting into the sky as a gift to the divine. Libations of wine or water were poured into rock-cut basins, symbolically nourishing the gods as the gods nourished the people. Festivals and processions. Religious festivals likely involved processions from the city to the high places, with priests leading the way and worshippers following, carrying offerings and singing hymns. These events reinforced Petra's identity as a united, God-protected city, essential for a people whose survival depended on cooperation in a harsh environment. Religion as power. The Nabataean kings used religion to legitimize their rule. By associating themselves with Dushara and other deities, they claimed divine favor, strengthening their authority both at home and abroad. Temples, festivals, and sacred monuments also served as diplomatic tools, impressing visiting dignitaries with Petra's piety and grandeur. A faith that endured. Even after Rome annexed Nabataea in 106 AD, many religious traditions continued. Temples remained active, and old gods were still worshipped alongside Roman ones. Over time, however, Christianity spread through the region, and Petra's pagan sanctuaries were abandoned or repurposed. Yet the sacred spaces remain, the altars, beetles, and temples carved into the living rock, silent but enduring witnesses to a faith that once bound the Nabataeans together and gave Petra its spiritual heartbeat. Decline and legacy. No golden age lasts forever. For Petra, the decline came not through a single catastrophe, but through a slow and steady erosion of the very forces that had made it great. Trade shifted, political tides turned, and nature itself dealt crushing blows. The Roman conquest. By the early 2nd century AD, the Nabataean kingdom stood in the shadow of a giant, the Roman Empire. In 106 AD, Emperor Trajan annexed the kingdom without recorded resistance, transforming it into the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. Why no great battle? Historians believe the Nabataeans chose diplomacy over destruction, possibly to preserve their wealth and avoid devastating losses. Petra remained important, but the capital of the new province was moved north to Bosra, in present-day Syria. Petra under Roman rule. Initially, Roman governance brought benefits. New roads connected Petra to the empire's vast network, trade continued, and Roman-style buildings appeared alongside Nabataean monuments. In 131 AD, Emperor Hadrian himself visited the city, renaming it Hadriana Petra, a sign of imperial favor, but the seeds of decline had already been planted. The shift in trade routes. Petra's lifeblood was its role as a hub for overland caravan trade. As the Romans expanded maritime routes through the Red Sea, goods from Arabia, Africa, and India increasingly bypassed Petra. Ships could carry larger cargo faster, cheaper, and with less risk than camel caravans trudging through the desert. With fewer caravans came fewer taxes, less income for merchants, and a slow drain of the wealth that had fueled Petra's grandeur. The earthquake of 363 AD nature struck a devastating blow in 363 AD when a massive earthquake hit the region. Much of Petra's infrastructure, including sections of its sophisticated water system, was destroyed. Temples, tombs, and homes collapsed. The city never fully recovered. Without the resources to rebuild on a grand scale, Petra's once vibrant streets grew quiet. Byzantine Petra. During the Byzantine period, Petra saw the construction of several churches as Christianity spread through the region. Pagan temples were converted or abandoned. While life continued, Petra was now a provincial backwater rather than a global trade capital. Archaeological evidence suggests that by the 6th century, the city's population had dwindled to a fraction of its former size. The final disappearance. By the early Islamic period, Petra had largely vanished from historical records. Local Bedouin tribes still knew of it, but to the outside world it was a lost city. Wind and sand slowly reclaimed the streets. The great façades stood silent, their carvings softened by centuries of erosion. The city that had once dazzled merchants and kings became a ghost of its former self, hidden in the desert. The rediscovery Petra remained a secret until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as a Bedouin, persuaded local guides to take him through the Sikh. Emerging into the open space before the Treasury, he became the first outsider in centuries to lay eyes on the city. His writings sparked fascination in Europe, and Petra re-entered the world's imagination as a place of mystery and adventure. Petra. Today. In modern times, Petra has been recognized as one of the greatest archaeological treasures on Earth. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and was named one of the new 7 Wonders of the World in 2007. Tourists from across the globe now walk the same paths once trodden by Nabataean traders, passing through the Sikh to see the glowing facade of the Treasury. Archaeologists continue to uncover new parts of the city, with much still buried beneath the sands. A lasting legacy. Petra's story is one of adaptation, resilience, and ingenuity. The Nabataeans transformed an unforgiving desert into a thriving cultural and economic hub. Their mastery of water, trade, and diplomacy allowed them to flourish for centuries. Even in ruin, Petra still speaks, through its columns, carvings, and silent streets, of a people who left an indelible mark on history. As the sun sets over the rose-red cliffs and the shadows lengthen across the Sikh, Petra reminds us that civilizations may rise and fall, but their stories can echo through the ages. And here, in the heart of the Jordanian desert, the voice of the Nabataeans still whispers in the wind.